Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MPART PFAS Community Update, the Cadillac Area of Interest. My name is Mike Gurney. I'm with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy as a Remediation and Redevelopment Outreach Specialist. I'm going to be in the background for most of the evening tonight, but I do have a couple housekeeping things I want to hit on before we get started. First, all lines are going to be muted throughout the meeting tonight. We still want to hear from you, so make sure you use that Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar, and you can do that throughout the presentation tonight. We'll have some time. We'll have a lot of time at the end for Q&A. So submit those questions throughout the presentation, and we'll take some time at the end to go over those. You can also use the raise hand button at that time at the end of the meeting, or if you're on the phone, I believe it's the pound or hash sign and then the number 2. And again, during the Q&A session is when we'll be able to take those. So lastly, we're recording this meeting. We'll have a link to this webinar, this meeting on our YouTube channel very shortly. I know the afternoon session is already up there. And if you're watching this is the 6 o'clock session. There's another one out there from noon today. So with that, I will hand it over to Abigail Hendershot.
Thank you, Mike. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So as Mike said, I'm Abby Hendershot. I'm the Executive Director for our Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. Happy to have you joining us for our 6 o'clock meeting. As Mike said, a couple housekeeping things. We will share the slides with you. So if you registered and gave us your email, we will send you a copy of the slide deck when we get all done with this. There will be plenty of time for questions and answers. So as you're thinking of your questions, go ahead and shoot them into the question and answer box, and we will get to those at the end. And we're going to focus on the Cadillac industrial area, but we do have some mentions of other sites in Cadillac that you guys have been interested in and asking questions. And we're also going to post in the chat some of our FAQs, the frequently asked questions that we put out last month, because there's a ton of really good information there. So if you haven't seen that, check that out as well. All right, so let's get started. So as I said, I'm going to do a quick MPART overview of some of the basics of PFAS, because while most people are pretty familiar with them, I think it's really good to make sure we're all on even ground. Chelsea Gary is our toxicologist from our Department of Health and Human Services. She's going to come back and talk with you about PFAS and health. Brandy Wheeler is our project manager from EGLE, so our Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. She's going to talk to you about the investigation area. Megan Seiner, who we didn't put on this, but she is also project manager for the Superfund side of things. So she's going to talk about the LDFA project. Ian Smith and Scott Kinzerski are going to talk about public water supplies for the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy as well. And so we have a whole panel of experts here to answer just about any question you can throw at us. And like I said, we'll have plenty of times for questions and answers. So let's start with the basics. PFAS. When I say PFAS, I'm talking about the whole family of compounds, all 10 to 15,000 of them. So PFOS, FOS is a one compound, but PFAS is the whole family. So why we can spend so much time talking about PFAS are they really have strong carbon-fluorine bonds. So these are very stable chemicals. They get into the environment. They don't break down easily, but they're really useful for a lot of our consumer goods because they do repel the waters, the oils, the fats, and the greases. And so we've used them in a lot of products over the years. And we started developing them in the 1940s, but there are many, many more of them than what we started with back then. And now we're, depending on how you define PFAS family, you could have 10 to 15,000 different chemicals. Once they get into the ecosystem, they really don't biodegrade. So they're not going to break down in sunlight. They're not naturally going to degrade with oxygen. It takes a lot of energy to break apart those carbon-fluorine bonds. So they move very easily in our environment and they can bioaccumulate. We all have some PFAS in our bloods already because of the so many things that we're exposed to in our consumer products that we know PFAS is We have a baseline accumulation of PFAS. Our job is, though, to try to get that out of your drinking water and make sure that we start reducing our exposure. We know there's some PFAS effects, health effects, that Chelsea is going to talk about here in a minute. And there's a lot of emerging science and information. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, you can find all kinds of PFAS science and articles out there from researchers around the universities. EPA has just set federal standards when it comes to maximum contaminant levels in drinking water. So we're pretty excited about that, the first drinking water standards for any of our PFAS in the country. So when you look at this slide here, you'll see that there's all kinds of things that obviously we have in our houses that have PFAS or would be covered with PFAS. So take the couch. The couch probably was, scotch guarded or stain proofed before it came home. The food packaging, all of your, grease proof food packaging, whether it's your pizza boxes or your taco wrappers or any kind of food packaging, you would end up with some sort of PFAS coating. Your carpets, your scrubbable paints, your Teflon pans, your car seats already come coated in PFAS. Your waterproof gear, all of your outdoor gear, outdoor tenting materials. You probably have a can of, waterproofing materials for your shoes still in your house. So all of those would have some form of PFAS. And then we also include firefighting foam in there because obviously that's what we attribute a lot of this to, but there's a lot of ways for PFAS to get into, that are already in your consumer goods, to get back into the environment. And one of the ways we're going to talk about that today is through your septic tank. And so depending on your household uses and what you do in your house, you could be loading your septic tank with potentially a lot of PFAS as well. So what that means for Michigan is that we have a big job. And so the MPART team was created, the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team was created in 2017 and then made an enduring body in 2019 under Governor Whitmer. And what that means is my job is to make sure that all 7 agencies are being strategically coordinating and collaborating on a PFAS response. And so this collaboration and strategy has allowed us to propel Michigan into one of the leaders in the country on PFAS response because of, all of this collaboration. And we always put local public health departments in there too, because anytime we get into a site response, at the local level, we have to include our local health. They're the eyes and ears on the ground, and so it's very important. But PFAS covers a lot of different things, everything from our airports to our fish and wildlife to agriculture to, our Department of Environment, obviously, and our fire service and all the fire stations and departments that we have across the state. So every time we come up and we discover a new site, we put together a project team. This is, again, an effort to take that collaboration that we do at the state level, bring it down to the local level so that we can talk about specific sites. This is what we've done here in the Cadillac area 3 different times because we have 3 different MPART sites in Cadillac. And we always include our Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. You'll have somebody that is a project manager who can tell us about the groundwater, the wastewater, the surface water, potentially some fish collections. Our Department of Health and Human Services will have a toxicologist, a geologist, epidemiologist, health educator, community engagement coordinator, and a fish consumption guidelines person. Local health, of course, will be there to help us review data. If there's a filter deployment that's necessary or other community outreach, they're there to be part of that team as we make those decisions. And so how we get the information, it comes in from a variety of different sources. But whenever we become aware of a site where groundwater concentrations are over our criteria for PFAS for one of the 7 that we have, that could kick us into potentially looking at needing an investigation, or we have elevated results for somebody that's self-sampled, or we have a surface water result that gives us pause or cause for concern that's something that we didn't expect, or any other kind of routine monitoring. All of those could cause us to want to do an investigation in an area. And every time we do that, again, the project team is formed to evaluate that data and check and see, does it mean in this case, does that piece of information cause us to want to do an expansion and start looking at residential drinking water wells out of an abundance of caution, because of what we know about that particular area. So what we're using to make those decisions are these criteria. The blue box on the left-hand side is our drinking water, Michigan's drinking water criteria. That is also known as our maximum contaminant levels. That drinking water standards are used for our municipal water supplies. So all the public water supplies around the state have to meet these standards to be safe for public consumption. The groundwater cleanup standards are the same numbers, but they're used for sites that have contaminated the groundwater, and where we have a liable party, we will ask them to clean up the groundwater to those standards. So same numbers, but you can definitely see the range in concentrations. PFNA at 6 parts per trillion, PFHXS or PFHXA, at 400,000 parts per trillion. And that's because of the differences in the toxicity between these chemicals. The family of chemicals is very large, but there's a lot of differences in toxicity between the different compounds. Surface water quality values are similar. We have 5 different criteria, and those depend on if that surface water criteria or surface water is being used as a drinking water source. So we have a lot of our lakes and rivers that are used for drinking water sources around the state. And so we take that into consideration. So not only is it protective for aquatic life, but it's also protective for human health. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea now, and she can take you through the PFAS and health pieces. Chelsea, you ready?
Hey Chelsea, before you jump in there, just a reminder for folks, the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, that's going to be the best way to ask questions throughout the presentation. That's going to be live for the entire presentation today, and we'll have a chance at the end of the presentation to then go over any of those questions. So for anybody who may have joined late, just a reminder, that's how we're going to ask questions today. So Chelsea, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So I'm Chelsea Gary. I'm with MDHHS, and I'm going to be going through some very general PFAS and health information. Some of you have maybe seen these slides before, so I'm going to just go through them pretty briefly, but just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So just to get started, I want to kick this off by kind of going through the role of MDHHS and your local health department, DHD10. One of our roles here is to understand the health concerns in the community and, determine how to address those and, evaluate the exposures to PFAS in your community. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to talk about this too much either, because Abby did cover quite a lot when it comes to, sources of PFAS. And we also have a really great fact sheet on this as well that goes into a little bit more detail. But, a couple things to note here is that, drinking contaminated water is one way to be exposed to PFAS. And this is a, pretty big concern in your community. And in addition to that, something I'm going to actually circle back to later in my presentation is that eating fish caught from water contaminated with PFAS is another way to be exposed to it as well. Next slide, please. So definitely wanted to go through this information because this is a very common question that we get where people want to know if they've been exposed to PFAS and they have a certain level of it in their blood. Is it possible for that level to ever go down? And the answer is yes. So while PFAS can bioaccumulate, it doesn't mean that it doesn't eliminate once exposure to that PFAS is reduced. So What you see here is some of the more common PFAS that can be found in the blood of those who are in the US, and this goes from 2000 to 2018. And what you'll notice is that, particularly for PFOS and PFOA, as those PFAS have been phased out of different products, the level of those PFAS in people's blood has gone down. So that's really good news. Next slide, please. So getting into some of the health effects that you could see from exposure to PFAS, it could include reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, small decreases in infant birth weight, and higher cholesterol. Next slide, please. This could also include thyroid disease, liver damage, decreased immune system response to vaccines, and developing certain types of cancer. So these health effects are highlighted and have been seen from some of the more common PFAS when people are exposed to high levels of those PFAS over a long period of time. Next slide, please. So as part of our evaluation of how to respond on the public health side to an investigation. It can include a few things, such as MDHHS comparison values, residential well results, and site-specific information. Next slide, please. So getting into what each of these are just a little bit more. The MDHHS comparison values are the lowest of the MDHHS public health drinking water screening level, or the MPART health base value or maximum contaminant level. And keeping in mind that both of these were set to protect everyone, including the more sensitive populations over the course of a lifetime. Next slide, please. So here are what those MDHHS comparison values are. So I'm not going to read off each one of these, but what you'll notice is that the first one is the MDHHS public health drinking water screening level, and then the rest are the MPART health base value or maximum contaminant level. So these are the comparison values that we use. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, another very important consideration throughout our investigation are residential well results, both individually and collectively. So that's why if you are offered to get sampling, it's really important that you accept our offer so we can get the best idea that we can of what's going on in your neighborhood. Next slide, please. And then lastly, site-specific information. So I won't be going into depth with these at all, but some of the site-specific information that we take into consideration would be anything that's known about a source, what's known about the geology in the area, and then lastly, what we know about the plume. Next slide, please. Another important piece of information is what to look for when selecting a filter for PFAS. So if you are looking to get a filter for your drinking water for PFAS, then one of the important considerations is to make sure that the filter does have the NSF standard 53 for PFOA and PFOS reduction. And while that is the certification, another thing to note is that these filters do frequently outperform their certification. So that means that they are reducing the PFAS levels lower than what they're certified for, and they're reducing more than just PFOA and PFOS. But it is important to remember with these filters that they should be properly maintained. That way they can keep performing as expected. And what you'll see on the left there is there's actually a link to more information about PFAS filters. Next slide, please. So then here, just wanted to highlight some of the public health response actions that MDHHS and your local health department can potentially have. So, again, these are just general. They aren't necessarily specific to your area, but depending on the area, no public health actions may be needed, or in some cases recommended filters or alternate water use may be something that's needed. Um, and then lastly, a really important point for everyone is education. So providing information on PFAS and making sure that people are educated on that. And part of that in education is that, both MDHHS and your local health department, DHD10, do have efforts in order to engage and, have people go out to the community with their community outreach efforts to, inform everyone and make sure that, they're aware of what's going on. And as part of this, it's anticipated that next month, in addition to educating residents and, business owners in the area, it's also really important to educate healthcare providers. And so next month, our public health detailers are anticipated to be out in your area to share information with your healthcare providers so that they are on the same page as well. And all of our community outreach and education has been happening and will continue to occur. Next slide, please. So the last thing that I wanted to finish up here is the topic of eat safe fish, essentially. What you have here, for those of you who have maybe seen this slide before, there isn't any new data here. But what you're seeing is some of the PFAS results for different fish that have been tested from Lake Mitchell and Lake Cadillac. So you're seeing some, lower levels of PFOS in some of these different fish. And where that comes into play is actually on my next slide. So next slide, please. We have our Eat Safe Fish recommendations. So what you're looking at here is the recommendations that we have for some of the different species of fish found in Lake Cadillac and Lake Mitchell. And what you'll notice is that at the time these recommendations were published, the chemical of concern for these was mercury. But one thing to note is that we do regularly update our Eat Safe Fish guides. So at the upper left of this screen, you will see a link to the Eat Safe Fish website. And that is one way that, you can stay updated on these recommendations. I don't believe all of the data that you saw on the previous slide was able to be incorporated into the recommendations that you see here, but just stay tuned as we plan to update these recommendations soon. And so you'll be able to stay up to date on that. But that's all I have, and I'm gonna pass it off to Brandy.
Hello, hi, my name is Brandy Wheeler. So I am the Eagle RRD District Geologist. So I deal mostly with the ground and groundwater. I'm also one of the PFAS leads, and I live and work in Cadillac, actually. Next. So to start out with, I'm going to talk about aquifers for a lot of my sections. So I want to kind of get settled in with what I'm going to be talking about. So here we can see an image that has several homes, and it kind of illustrates how homes can grab and pull water from different sections of an aquifer. So an aquifer works kind of like a cake, where there are layers of clay and sand that have water in the water-bearing zones of the sand. And you can see that each house can get their water from different sections of the aquifer, and each aquifer might flow in a different direction. Uh, these aquifers can also connect. There's a few on the slide here where it shows maybe a little bit of that connection, but there's a complex relationship with aquifers and how they flow. and how they connect with each other. And the industrial park and the area up there shows a lot of this complexity as well. Most water residents as well, they pull from what we call the intermediate aquifer, and that's like the 50 to 200 foot zone. It varies pretty heavily based on the geology of where the homes are specifically located. Next. And so for this map, I want to just get situated on that as well. I know there's a lot on here. So we have the industrial park right above Lake Cadillac there. The industrial area is outlined in that light blue in the middle. We also have some of our sampling areas that we've been investigating in the orange red tone there in the boxes, and a few of our zones where we've expanded out from there in the purple right above the Lake Cadillac right there. We also have some of our groundwater flow on the map here. Those are the blue arrows. So that is from about 50 years of data from several sites out here that we have investigated. And this is groundwater flow from the intermediate aquifer specifically because that's where the homes are pulling their water from. So we also have on this map in the hashed green right there, that is the capture zone for the historic extent for the LDFA and the Kaiser Superfund area. So capture zones mean where the extent of the contamination was, where it kind of terminated, and then there's no impact beyond there for the historic extent. That's not where it currently is, but that's just the extent. And we also have Rex airs on there as well in that yellow color, smaller right there that's being highlighted. So contamination, when we're talking about how it moves, it usually moves with the groundwater. That's why it's very important that we know how the groundwater moves out here. We also choose our areas where we were investigating homes based on where the groundwater flows. We did several upgradient of where the groundwater is moving through the industrial park there, and that's where you see a lot of the homes sampled to the south of the park right there and just north of Lake Cadillac. Next. So this is the same map. It's got a few different things on there. It doesn't have the groundwater flow. And it also has brand new data. We actually just got this map today, so that'll be sent out as soon as we get more people on the team that are able to send it out to you guys. But we have on the map here, we have some red, yellow, and green dots. So those are samples from homes. The green has non-detects, the yellows have some detections, but they're below any Michigan criteria. And then the reds are homes that have sampled with exceedances of the Michigan criteria. So when we are looking for sources, we haven't found a source, but investigations like this chase the risk and exposure, and we may never find a source. So groundwater, the geology, some of the directions, the depths, the concentrations, they indicate that residents are not impacted by the results of the industrial park. Those are all down gradient. They're to the east of that. Any of the homes we have there are out of where the groundwater would be affected by the industrial park. As well, because of the depths, the distance, and the directions that we're seeing, is an indication that septic systems from residents may be the likely source. Things that Abby was talking about earlier, like washing, any cleaning that's making its way to the septic fields, anything like that, make its way into the ground and groundwater, and then they migrate just because they're near the wells and they're forever chemicals, and our septic fields are not designed to deal with the PFAS. And then we can see based on where the red and yellow dots are, where some of that might be located, where it's very small. There are several sources that are likely out here. And because we've been sampling all of the areas out here, we've kind of run out of areas that may be impacted by the industrial park. So we're not expanding sampling at this time. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Megan Sinar.
Thanks, Brandy. I'm Megan Seiner. I'm the Eagle PM for the Superfund site. And Brandy did a good job of covering the groundwater flow, lithology, and the capture zones. I'm going to talk more about what we've done on site in 2024 and 2025, and also what we plan on doing coming this year and into the next. So the LDFA has sampled all of the extraction wells that are on site. That includes 6 shallow aquifer extraction wells and excuse me, 10 intermediate aquifer extraction wells. They've also done the I-5 influent effluent sampling, which the influent is where the water comes from I-5 into the treatment plant, but prior to the carbon treatment. And the effluent is after the carbon treatment. It leaves and goes into the air stripper. So they've done sampling prior to and after the carbon treatment. They've also done it twice, which included the prior to and after the carbon was changed out. So before they had new carbon and after they got a new carbon media in. They've also sampled the treatment plant discharge to the Clam River. All of this sampling has shown that two of the extraction wells, S2, which is just north of the Kaiser facility, and I-11, which is north of 13th Street, is exceeded the Michigan drinking water MCLs for PFOA. However, the discharge sample to the Clam River was below the surface water quality values and the drinking water MCLs for all the PFAS. Next slide, please. What is coming next is that the LDFA is continuing to develop their QAPs and their sampling and monitoring plans. Those will get submitted to EPA and be approved. Once those are approved, they will sample the groundwater for the known contaminants, so VOCs and the hexchrome, and then they will also sample for PFAS. In addition to that, because carbon treatment is a known treatment for PFAS, they are evaluating the potential to rearrange the plant piping. This will allow more extraction wells to be directed into the carbon treatment. Right now, there's only I-5 that goes straight to the carbon. The EPA is in the process of drafting their 5-year review, which is expected to be done in August of this year. And Eagle and DHHS and the local health are going to continue to evaluate the residential well results, determine the appropriate response, as well as determine if there's a additional sampling needed. As Brandy mentioned, at this point, we do not see the need for additional sampling as it is associated with the industrial area. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ian.
Thank you, Megan. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ian Smith. I work with Eagle in the Drinking Water and Environmental Health Division. I manage our emerging contaminants unit, and in that capacity, we oversee sampling and assessments for contaminants of emerging concern. So PFAS is up very close to the top of that list. And I'm going to talk to you tonight about public water supply in the Cadillac area of interest. So this region is served, in addition to those private wells, it is served by two larger municipal community water supplies. These are the City of Cadillac and the Herring Charter Township Community Water Supply. The City of Cadillac supply is currently sampling on an annual basis for PFAS for compliance. All past compliance monitoring results for that supply have been non-detect for all tested PFAS compounds. The Herring Charter Township Community Water Supply is currently sampling for PFAS compliance on a quarterly basis. Past compliance monitoring results for that supply have been either at or below the corresponding MCLs, or they've been non-detect. However, the supply has not yet had an exceedance of any PFAS MCLs. Next slide, please. All right, so this is just a visual representation of, well, beginning with a visual representation of those two supplies. So thank you, Abby or Miranda, whoever's doing the laser pointer. That upper kind of orangish block around the airport, that represents the approximate boundaries of Herring Charter Township service area. And then down below, you can see the larger kind of bluish purple block that represents the approximate boundaries of the City of Cadillac community water supply. I'd also mention with regard to Herring Charter Township, they are currently doing some testing around the installation of a new water well with a plan to expand service into, if you see, Abby, can you point? Yep, right about there. There's a little gap there. That is the area that is planned to be part of a water main extension in the near future. It's my understanding that project is on pace to finish this year. Additionally, on this map, you'll see there are some numbered circles, 1 through 10. Those represent the approximate locations of smaller public water supplies. Most of these are what we would call non-transient, non-community water supplies. They're supplying water to a population of 25 or more people for part of the year. One of them is a smaller community water supply, but I'll get to that in just a moment. Up where the laser pointer is right now, that area there is you're probably familiar with. That is where the Wexford Missaukee Intermediate School District complex exists, as well as the Cadillac area YMCA and Baker College. That region there has had a couple of supplies with exceedances of MCLs. One of those is a past exceedance. That's the Wexford Missaukee Career Tech Center. And one is a current exceedance. That's the Wexford Missaukee Special Services and Admin Building. If you move down to the right, just to the east of Cadillac there, numbers 6 and 7, neither of those supplies have had detections of PFAS, but number 6 there is a smaller community water supply. So that's actually an assisted living facility that provides water year-round to its residents. And then down below, those 3 circles lie in what I would say would probably be a region of interest for all of you, but we call it an area of interest. That is one of MPART's newer areas of interest. The US 131 and shoot, I can't remember the other. Somebody will correct it for me. Mackinac Trail. Thank you. Whew, thanks, Miranda. Okay, there are 3 supplies down in that region. Number 9 is Benton Baker Buick. Benton Baker Buick actually had a exceedance in the past. Their detection levels have decreased to a level where they are not currently in exceedance. Number 8 is Dental Health Professionals. That supply is currently in exceedance. And with that, since we're talking about the US 131 and Mackinac Trail area of interest, I'm going to hand it off to Abby to talk a little more about it. Thanks, Abby.
All right, let me find my slides again here real quick. All right, thanks, Ian. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit. This data is, again, very new. We just got some additional data. So this is what we're calling that area of interest to the south of Cadillac, the US 131 and Mackinac Trail area of interest. We don't know the source out here for the contamination, but we are getting some hits in some of those drinking water supply wells out there. And so we had sent our consultant out to do sampling. We sampled 8 drinking water wells in the area. 7 of those wells were non-detect, so that's great news. These are residents. And then 1 well had 2 parts per trillion of PFOA, which is compared to 8 parts per trillion, which is our cleanup criteria. So well below cleanup criteria for that home. This is all good news. We don't yet have it mapped out on a map, so we will get that done and share that with the community here as soon as we get it done. But it is an update that we wanted to share with you tonight since we had you and we knew you would be asking. So good news there. The other one that Ian mentioned is our Wexford Missaukee Career Technical Center. This is a project that we investigated because of the hits at the Wexford CTC buildings. or because of those detections they had there. And again, trying to figure out the source. We think that it might have been coming from a septic field at the Wexford CTC, probably floor waxes or floor polishes or something like that. We can't know for sure. It is not affecting the Baker College or the YMCA, but it did seem to affect the homes that were sampled off to the left. Low level detections, but there were still some homes there with a couple of exceedances. And so those homes, as well as the Wexford CTC, will all be hooked up to municipal water as part of that Herring Township project. So no additional sampling is planned there, but we are getting them all hooked up to municipal water because of those detections. So I just want to go through a quick summary of some of what we're really want to make sure everybody takes home tonight. As far as the Cadillac industrial area, we have 70 different drinking water wells that have been sampled. We've offered sampling to a lot of homes. There were some homes that didn't take us up on the offer. Some homes we could not connect with, even though we went and knocked on doors and made phone calls and sent them letters. But we're able to connect with 70, so that's good. Out of those, 12 of them were above our criteria for drinking water. 44 more had detections below criteria, and then 14 of them were non-detect. So you saw those on the heat map that we showed, that Brandy showed you a little bit ago. We also received 11 homes that did self-samples, and we've mapped them all. All of them are below criteria, and they weren't in this necessarily in this project area. They were outside of our project area. The data, as Brandy said, the data suggests that we've got multiple low-level sources in the area. Still trying to figure that out, but the sources are probably varied. The PFAS signature all looks different. We're thinking it could be septic tanks. It could be fires where maybe potentially AFFF was used, firefighting foam, small manufacturing. We are not sure. Our investigation here is primarily focused on making sure we're protecting public health, so making sure we know what's in people's groundwater and drinking water wells. Doing investigations like this doesn't necessarily lead us to one particular source. So, but we know that because Cadillac has so much sand and the geology is very complex, as Brandy showed you, that the contaminants do have that opportunity to move very quickly through the sand and get into multiple aquifers. And so that's why we're kind of finding all kinds of things in many different aquifers. So at this point, the residents who had detections are being offered point of use filters for under the kitchen sinks. Those point of use filters, as Chelsea said, are effective at reducing PFAS. We have done our own verification of those. DHHS has done verification of those point of use filters, and they have really good results. They're looking not just at reducing PFOS and PFOA, but all of the PFAS. So we're very confident in those point of use filters. While obviously it's not an option for everybody on the call today, but we know that, connection to municipal water is going to be the best option for everybody, just because that municipal water is sampled on a regular basis, and it would have to meet the most stringent criteria for drinking water consumption. Cadillac's municipal water is non-detect. Herring Township has detections, but is currently in compliance, and they are working on installing a new well, which hopefully, as Ian said, will be on schedule to be addressed quickly. All of these agencies continue to work together to make sure we're addressing the situation both for municipal and private wells. But if you're outside of our investigation area, and we haven't really talked about, the rest of Cadillac, but if you're outside of the investigation area that we've talked about tonight, the best thing you can do is to sample your own drinking water well. There's a couple of ways to do that. And we know there's over 1 million drinking water wells in the state of Michigan, so it's going to be impossible for us to test all of them. So we do appreciate the Herring Township has is in the process of purchasing some CycloPure tests for some residents. And, as those results come in, we'll take a look at them as well and just keep an eye on, make sure there's nothing that pops up it looks like an anomaly, looks like something we might want to do additional investigation. So that the project team will be taking a look at those results. And if something is a really elevated, high concentration result, then we're probably going to want to step out and do an additional investigation or maybe look at a new area. But we're going to let the science, we're going to let the data drive those decisions as we do with all of our MPART sites, because it's really important to be able to defend our decisions and the information we have. So on our website, on our MPART website, there is additional information on testing for PFAS. If you want to get your well tested by a private drinking water lab, you can do that. There's certified PFAS laboratories out there that will be about $280 a sample, but it's a self-test kit, pretty easy. There are other ways to do it with non-certified methods, but can still give you some decent results to tell you whether or not you've got PFAS. And there's some more information on our website. So if you're interested in that, check out our MPART website that's in the chat. And I don't expect you to see and be able to read all of this, but we have the entire team that you've seen, a lot of them here today, available to take questions and help you get your answers that you need for your specific situation. We will have this available in the slide deck. You can definitely look us up, and it's on our MPART website as well. So as I promised, we've got plenty of time for questions and answers. And so I will ask our team to go ahead and unmute and turn on their cameras, and we can start taking whatever questions we have out there. All right, what have we got for questions? Let's see. All right. All right, so the first question came in at 616. Can she talk more about the one that hasn't been phased out? Does anybody know what she might be referring to there?
I think that may have been when I was talking, and might be referring to PFAS that maybe haven't been phased out of production, if that makes sense. So while I don't have the specific answer on this right now, I'm more than happy to touch base with you after this meeting, unless someone else here knows off the top of their head like a great resource to check in with that one.
I just say that there's, we know that PFOS and PFOA have been phased out in use here in the US. They have not been phased out of use in China and other countries. And so depending on your consumer product, you may be still getting those contaminants in from if you're ordering stuff from overseas. Those PFOS and PFOA have been replaced with other PFAS compounds, shorter chain. So PFOS and PFOA are 8-carbon fluorine molecule, and the newer formulations are either 6-chain or 4-chain. So they're, the idea is the shorter the chain, potentially the less toxicity. And so they have usually been replaced with other fluorinated compounds. And so while the phase out has happened for some of them, there's a lot of replacement chemicals out there that we don't necessarily have all the toxicological data yet to be able to talk about. So it's a complex subject, but there is quite a bit of stuff out online if you want, or feel free to reach out to the team here and we can help you get more answers on that. So when is the state expected to adopt federal levels or standards? So, Ian, I'm going to pass that one to you.
So a couple things. First, I'll mention, just for the sake of the group, the federal standards did go into effect in June of 2024. They were published in April, but they in fact they went into effect in June. However, they're not going to be fully enforced until June of 2029. So there's a bit of a lag there to allow nationwide public water supplies to come up to speed and prepare for that enforcement to kick in. In Michigan, as you all know, we currently have PFAS MCLs kind of on the books. Um, these are enforceable. They have, over the last year or so, perhaps slightly more than a year, come under challenge in the courts. We are currently awaiting a decision from the Supreme Court on the validity of Michigan's current MCLs. Regardless, we are still able to enforce those because we've been granted a stay. Now, to get to the question, that was just all context. To get to the question, we are prepared to enter into a formal rulemaking to bring Michigan's PFAS standards up to the level of those new federal ones to be at least as stringent as those once we have a decision from the Supreme Court. Um, the plan will be, at least the plan we are working with currently, will be in each case where the federal level is more stringent, we will meet that new level. But in some cases, Michigan's levels are actually more stringent than the federal levels. We will aim to maintain those more stringent state levels as part of Michigan's updated PFAS levels. So that was a longer answer, perhaps, than I think you're hoping for. The short version is as soon as we hear from the Supreme Court, we'll take steps to move into formal rulemaking. That process takes time, but we are hoping to be able to enforce our updated MCLs much sooner than that federal enforcement date of 2029. We would want to aim for something perhaps in very early 2027,
Mhm. Mhm.
which would still give our supplies the chance to come um, into compliance with compliance with the sampling requirements. Anyway,
And
I
one of the
hope that
questions,
answers your questions. Go
yeah,
ahead.
one of the questions, talk about coming into compliance. One of the questions is about Herring Township's
Mhm.
wells and whether or not they would currently exceed federal standards.
Yep.
So,
So, as I mentioned, there's just to reiterate, there's currently no enforcement of those federal standards. So Herring Township is not in exceedance by rule of those. However, they have had detections historically up until now at and above the new federal MCL thresholds. So we will be working with Herring Township to proactively address that prior to those either the federal rules or hopefully Michigan's updated PFAS rules going into effect with those lower numbers. So not currently in exceedance of Michigan's, not currently in exceedance of the federal standards because nobody is, but we will help them prepare because if they were to do nothing, then there would be a potential exceedance in the future.
okay,
I hope
great.
that answers your question.
And Beth asked one more question. She asked, where do they fall with federal levels? And I'm not sure what exactly she was referring to with that question. So Beth, if you want to specify more in the question and answer, we can specifically answer your question. Just
No,
for our
Abby,
view.
I think that was during your summary slide, that second bullet you had about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was when I wrote it down. So I think that came in on the second bullet of your summary slide.
Um, so this one here.
Yes, I believe that was what that.
Okay. So yes, for
Beth, feel
these.
free to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Feel free to jump in if we were not right with that. So for these residential samples, they were compared to our Michigan criteria, and not the federal standards because the federal standards are not currently enforceable at this point. But filters were given to all people with detections. So, in an effort to be as protective as possible, we're giving filters to everybody with detections while we complete the investigation. But as far as exceeding criteria, there were 12 homes that exceeded criteria for a variety of different compounds. One thing I will mention about this data is we were trying to compare the detections between the different homes, and none of it really seemed like it was a consistent plume, or it was all coming from the same source. There's a lot of different types of PFAS compounds that we're finding in a variety of wells. So again, we're still not exactly sure on sources. So
A- Abby, it sounds like Beth made a comment while you're talking. I think maybe it would be helpful. Could we go back to the map with the,
yep.
are there numbers on the map for those 70 drinking water wells? I seem to remember seeing some numbers.
No, that was for the hold on a minute, I'll get back here. That was for the Harrington or the
Oh,
Wexford CTC.
I
Uh,
apologize.
yes, but the red ones are the exceedances, and then the yellows are detections, and then the greens obviously are non-detects. So if we were to compare to federal standards, some of these yellows would go to exceedances if we were to compare it to the federal standards, but not all of them. But we did not compare it in that respect. So, Beth, hopefully that answers your question. And I'm not seeing a ton of other questions. If you've got questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and we can certainly get to them. Or if any of our live audience, because I know we've got a live audience out at the high school, if any of the live audience has any questions, feel free to put those into the chat as well, and or into the question and answer box, and we can answer those.
And just a reminder, I know we do have some folks calling in just on the phone. If you would like to, you can raise your hand on the phone, and that's the pound or the hash sign, and then the number 2. And again, that function is also available for anybody in Zoom, but specifically for our call-in folks, if there's any questions there.
Yeah. All right, to everybody, all of my presenters, is there anything else that we forgot to mention that we should be mentioning here? No? All right. Well, we don't necessarily need to keep anybody if we've answered all the questions. Okay, here we go. We got a few more. When will the MPART interactive map be updated? The MPART website with this new updated map that you're seeing right now, we'll try to get that done early next week so we can get that updated onto the website. The interactive map doesn't have the drinking water well data, so that doesn't go up there. Just the MPART sites and any of our surface water samples and that kind of stuff. So hopefully that helps. And the heat map, yes, the heat map will go up onto our MPART website, Susan, hopefully next week. And then Beth is suggesting that we use the federal numbers for us at this point on all the test results, in the spirit of how Matt from the LDFA is asking the city to get him what he needs to make informed decisions. We can't use the EPA's numbers until we can enforce them. So we use them in the background to compare to, to help us make decisions. But, we can only actually present the data that we can enforce as a regulatory agency. And so the Michigan criteria is what we're able to enforce and have on our records. So as Ian talked about, we will be updating it as quickly as we can. To be able to incorporate the EPA standards, but that will require some rulemaking and does require a public comment process and, can take, 6 to 9 months or so to go through that process, depending on how things play out. All right. Anybody have anything else then? Or anything else that I've failed to answer? Okay, Beth's typing one more, I think.
Well, we have a second. I'll just one quick reminder. We're going to share an email with everyone who registered or didn't register but attended either this afternoon session or this evening sessions. We'll include a copy of the slides, links to the two YouTube videos, the recordings of the meetings, and any additional information that we hope to include that will all be in that email. So hopefully within the next day or two, I'm making promises. I'm not the one sending out the email, but keep an eye on your email inbox, and that will be coming. So it's not just the folks that were able to attend. I know if you registered and were not able to attend, so if you have neighbors or folks that reach out, just let them know they'll be getting an email with this information.
And I believe we will, we'll have this on our YouTube channel, but also on the MPART website. And I think that the city will probably be posting this as well on their website as well. So perfect. All right. All right. Any other questions or hands that have gone up?
I don't see any hands up.
Okay. And I'm just going to ask, I know we've got,
There's a question if you scroll down, Abby.
oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you. Where was the public announcement when you first found out PFAS were in the test wells? What year did you first ask LDA test, but they declined, or was that the EPA who asked? Megan, do you have that information? Or some of the information? I don't know if you've got all of it.
Sorry, the question is, where was the public announcement when you first round of PFAS were in test wells?
Whoops, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, Megan?
I was just reading the question over, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Hey,
So,
and if I could, actually, I'm gonna read it out loud because we have folks that don't see the question. So, where was public announcement when you first found out PFAS were in test well? What year did you first ask LDFA to test, but they declined it, or was that EPA who asked?
it was the EPA that asked. Eagle went out and sampled in 2021 and 2022 to look at PFAS. The reason being that they were going to delist the northern air site because the plume has been shrinking and it's not, there's no more exceedances. So, but the concern was possibly looking into PFAS, and so that's why Eagle went out. When Eagle went out, the criteria or the samples were all below the criteria, so that there was nothing that came from that at that time.
Correct. That was sampling that I partially requested. It was because the EPA did not have criteria at the time, but the state of Michigan did. That's why the state of Michigan requested to do sampling at Northern Air Plating, because plating is a place that we can expect to see PFAS. But the results that came back were very low level, all below Michigan criteria, and did not indicate that Northern Air was a sample or was a source area.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that answers the question. And then Susan asked about checking on any industry north of Mary Street. Um, and I believe if we're looking at the map, this is Mary Street over here. These industries all have municipal water or are connected to municipal water, as we understand it. And
Correct.
Brandy, if you're looking at the map, we would expect groundwater to go in this direction, correct?
Yeah, something like that. North, northwest, something around there.
So we have not specifically looked at these industries because they've been on municipal water. So, and we don't believe that they would be impacting Mary Street. It would be something off to the south here, is something in that direction that we would be looking. So, but we are still trying to figure out the potential sources for Mary Street and Marathon Street too.
If I may, also, all the industries north of there to the west, northwest, the three that you can see really plain, were all built after the LDFA went into production after 97 or for 97. The power plant went in with the LDFA cleanup, and the other two buildings to the west were built in early 2000s. So obviously that'd be after the LDFA was active. So,
And so we've got a couple of, Beth wants to know why you wouldn't educate the community. You found a new emerging contaminant. I think, Brandy, again, if you want to speak to the results that you found back in 2021, 22, was that when it was for the LDF or that LDFA sampling?
Yes. So samples were all below state criteria. There was a different EPA lead at the time. She's since retired, but there was internal discussions there. The EPA lead. The state is there to help with the Superfund site, but we're not there to lead it. The sampling was done by us in an attempt to potentially identify something like that, but the EPA would be the lead for either listing it as a contaminant or including it in their next 5-year review and in their delisting process, unless Megan has something else she'd like to say to that because she's the Superfund person.
No, that's correct. And the EPA can't make decisions without having a approved sampling plan and having sampled for PFAS. So the recommendation came from Eagle to sample because we did have the criteria, but the EPA did not have it until this year. So it was the Eagle recommended to the EPA that we sample because of the northern air site.
Hey, Megan, if you're able to speak up into your microphone a little bit more, or
Oh yeah, sorry.
thank you.
So what I was saying was that the EPA can't make decisions based on a criteria that or a sample that they don't have criteria for or a sampling plan for. So the PFAS was sampled at the recommendation of Eagle because of the nature of what Northern Air did. But at the time, EPA did not have any criteria to compare to or could compare to it. So Eagle took that kind of on themselves. And as Brandy said, it was below our criteria.
Yeah. Yeah. So EPA didn't list PFOS and PFOA as hazardous substances, so they could, legally ask for that sampling before 2024. But we kind of pushed the situation and did our own sampling because we knew that this could be a potential source and we wanted to see what was there. And so that's the sampling that Brandy did. And then we, of course, shared it with our Superfund section, who shared it with EPA. And so we've been trying to do this at all of our Superfund sites, is make sure PFAS sampling is done at all the Superfund sites across the state as well, because again, there's many sources, as we talked about, of PFAS, and we want to look at the industries and the ones that have the high potential for impacting groundwater first, especially with the existing sites. So this was another example of a site that we tried to push and get that sampling done, and we did. So, yep. All right. Thank you, Beth. Anything else you guys see in the questions and answers here that we missed?
One more interjection here, Abby. Just a reminder to everyone that as part of the PowerPoint that we're going to send out, there is that slide that has all the contact information. And so obviously the meeting at some point is going to end here tonight. That doesn't mean that the conversation will. So feel free, continue to reach out to these folks if you have additional questions and keep that conversation going. Yeah.
Yep, perfect. All right. Well, I don't see too much in the chat and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So feel free to reach out to us or anyone here on the team if you've got additional questions. We're happy to help you answer those. And look for additional updates from us as additional information and heat maps come out. So thanks again for joining us all tonight.